We all know the ship, mostly because it's been in the game. The ship being based on an actual ocean liner. And that ship, however, had gotten a rework in a later update. What ship am I talking about? Well, the Titania. The Classic Titania was once a grand ship in a time, but now no longer the grand ship she once was. Instead, she has been replaced by the reworked version of Titania. But today, we'll be going to what happened to the Classic Titania after the update that involved the ship's rework. The Titania, just a week before the update, was having her voyage. On the words of the people aboard, she will have that final day with her original owner, Pokecraft the Sea. Fresh from Pokecraft the Sea's dry docks was the reworked Titania. On September 4th, 2025, Titania we brought to her new home of Main Island, while Classic Titania was brought to a dock, and right after the ship brought in the first voyage of the new Titania started on September 5th, 2025, where there would be good fanfare. However, the hand of who owned the Classic Titania would switch. On September 10th, 2025, a deal was finalized. The Classic Titania would be sold by Pokecraft the Sea Shipping Company and sold to Sinkapore's Film and Sink Company, a company that makes replicas of ships and sinks said ships for filming purposes. The ship Titania, despite displaying Titania on her nameplates, would have her fourth funnel removed and be renamed the Metania. With the assistance of advertisement to begin to have the first voyages known of the Metania, the first voyage will be a success, and the Metania will remain with Sinkapore's up until early 2026. During the final voyage the ship had, passengers reported to both crew and the ship's captain, Captain Julian Ben, that there was something going on below deck. A fire had begun to spread. And instead, the captain decided to do something in hopes of preventing the ship from possibly sinking due to the fire. On January 15th, 2026, a disgruntled stowaway decided to go aboard the Metania. Unfortunately, at this time, the worst still there was no way to stop the fire, and the Metania was left to burn. At around 6:30 Cell and Sync time, the damaged and destroyed Metania was exposed. Parts of the Titania's waterline had received damage due to the fire, with the ship most not being touched. An agreement was made that an investigation would be done, and after learning about the disgruntled person would be barred from traveling on any ships in Sail and Sink. The wreck on the Metania, though charred, would be put up for sale by Sinkables. Despite some people wanting to buy the wreck, a new person would step up to buy not just the wreck, but to buy materials for the repairs of the Metania. Queso, the owner of Queso Film Studio and Voyages, decided to buy the Metania from Sinkables. The ship, however, would be renamed to Lania and had the first funnel removed. The ship now despite having been restored, still would keep this name, along with the nameplates that bared her original name, Titania. On February 8th, 2026, a day after the release of the Storm and Rescue update, the Lania would do her first ever voyage. Just like with Sinkables, the Lania would have success, but it wouldn't appear in any videos. Instead, it would be used for voyages. However, the ship was going to have a short-lived voyage, and people would learn why. In the middle of the night of February 20th, the Lania was sailing smoothly. However, fog was at its worst. The captain, Lilcmeq, was asleep in their cabin. Captain Lilcmeq worked for Queso. However, the worst came in as soon as they heard the following noise. The ship hit head-on, and the person aboard is gonna back up. Unaware to those aboard the Lania, the ship was sinking. When they pulled away from the rock, part of the ship broke off and begun her sinking. Crews went below deck to investigate. What they saw was not good. Lilcmeq, the captain of the ship, decided to keep passengers calm above deck by talking about their horse, known by Cray. However, below deck, there was the flooding was getting worse. And soon evacuations begun. The Lania was taking a final plunge. Well, he was taking more water in. The ship was not going to make it. An SOS was indeed sent, but unfortunately, no ships would arrive in time to save the Lania. Nor would they be in time to save, nor would they be in time to see the Lania from above the water for a final time. During the time of her sinking, water finally got into the top decks, and as a result, her top decks began to take in water. Luckily, there was more than enough lifeboats for all the passengers, and even the crew, as, believe it or not, multiple people on the ship did have the Captain Game Pass. However, the sinking begun to accelerate. The Titania was going down at a more quick pace. The Lania was going down. There was nothing they could do as soon as water began to rush up to the higher deck. And soon, the water swamped the crow's nest and the bridge. Water was flooding into the Lania's dining room, where it was originally going to be set for breakfast. Part of her she would be no longer able to do breakfast in the morning, as of course the ship was sinking and water was overwhelming the dining room. During the sinking, the ship would lose both funnels. And they had no choice. The ship was going down. The ship does a final plunge. The Lania would be under the water. The ships that would come back would come to the location of the ship sinking, or the ship's wreck site. Would be the MV Rescuer, a crane ship, the Grand Cruise Liner, and both reworked Titania and reworked Metania. Just during the investigation, a research vessel will be sent out to explore the wreckage of the Lania. The discovery wasn't for that, for the investigation purposes, but to see the condition of the ship just after it went down. The research vessel's crew noticed a couple pieces of hull laying down on the seabed. This told them, along with that, of damage to the left side. They knew what this meant. There was damage on the ship. The crews of the ship would see the following: minor damage on the ship's upper hull, but major damage caused by the rock that the ship would have landed on during its fall. The hull having missing portions of it, either destroyed to bits or just laying on the seabed. On March 1st, the investigation on what happened, who was at fault with the Lania sinking, would happen to end. In this building here, the investigation was being held. At the time, the investigation had the following people: Pokécraft to Sea, Sinkables, Julian Ben, the former captain of the Metania, former captain of the Lania, Lilcmeq, and Carasso. The ship's investigation was short. They had learned that the cause of the sinking was unfortunately caused by negligence of a crew member who was not paying attention at the time. Even though there was fog, the ship was told to do the following: be slow. But last, a crew member who was unnamed would never become part of any other companies again. I would also have gotten barred by from sailing on any ships and sail and sink. As for the fate of the Titania, after its renames, they all agreed the wreck of the ship will now remain underwater. Over the next months, the ship would begin to rust, but unfortunately, the worst would later on come on in with age. In June 2026, the Lania, Metania, and Titania were now part of Sail and Sink history books, as the wreck would soon be corroded away and no longer exist. The ship, surprisingly, during its whole voyage, never had a loss of any Robloxian lives. An agreement was made between Pokey, Sinkables, and Carasso that another Classic Titania would never be built. However, fate could possibly play out, as a second Titania could be built, however, the other Titania is still in service. Unlike that, of the Classic Titania, which unfortunately was also lost to the sea. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video of me doing a kind of a what if kind of thing, but also an alternate history involving the Titania, at least the classic one. I hope for the best you enjoyed watching this, and hopefully you had a good day, or good night, depending on what time you're watching this. I'll see you next time. Bye!